All right, it's time to talk about the AFC champion Cincinnati Bengals. And to do that with us today is Crissy Froyd, NFL insider. Crissy, thanks for being with us today.
Yeah, for sure. Thank you.
All right, so let's start with this Bengals team. And obviously it starts with the man himself, Cool Joe Burrow. Where's he expected to go this year? What's the next step for Joe Burrow as a pro? He's gone to the Super Bowl, played really well last year with a not so great offensive line. What's next for him? What's the expectation in 2022?
Yeah, well, Joe Burrow, in my opinion, has already shown himself to be an elite quarterback. And I know standing the test of time and maintaining a high level of play is a big deal for a lot of people when it comes to calling a quarterback elite. But this is a player who practically instantly became the best player on a terrible team in which he walked into a bad situation back in 2020, particularly where the offensive line is concerned, like you said, got injured, then came back, and not only to perform at a high level, but to take a team to the Super Bowl, really turned them around a short period of time and gave them a real chance in that. So Burrow has some good pieces around him offensively. Obviously, Jamar Chase from LSU, impressive level of success just on his end. Big positive with the chemistry that goes back to the LSU days. And I kind of know that there's the whole Dan Marino Super Bowl thing that's become this big deal where people have unreasonably come to the conclusion that Burrow simply cannot and will not make it back to the big stage and win the game. But that's just a complete falsehood to me. History doesn't always repeat itself in that manner. And those things, quite frankly, just don't have any correlation. And I've studied a lot of quarterbacks, covered Joe Burrow at LSU, was still in school whenever I was around him. And really, to me, is just the epitome of the definition of generational talent. Mechanically sound guy, makes really good decisions, really accurate, has all the intangibles, brings a strong it factor to the table. And even though he's been given some credit for it, still has a vastly underrated amount of mobility and sheer speed that we all came to appreciate at LSU that I don't think anybody else has really noticed. And I think with a quarterback like that, I think he's only going to improve and continue to expound upon that. And I think that's taking the next step, is just continuing to prove to people that he is in that elite category, even though it's still early.
Yeah, Crissy, and the thing that impressed me so much about watching him over the course of his short career so far, and especially last year during that playoff run, was just the level of maturity. It really, nothing shakes this guy. He seems to be just wise beyond his years. Is that what you hear, too, from his teammates and folks who are inside that building and talk about Joe Burrow as a leader?
Yeah, I think he's always brought a leadership quality to LSU. I think whenever he came to LSU when he was in college, like he kind of was the new guy on the block. I think it took a little bit of time for people to accept him, but they quickly came to respect him and they wanted to play for him, which is why they ended up winning the national championship. And really very little time after he arrived on the scene. And I think that that's been the sense with the Bengals as well.
Well, the Joe Burrow investment that Cincinnati has made obviously is huge to protect. And we saw last year the Bengals struggled on the offensive line. They addressed some of it in free agency. But what has gone on with the offensive line specifically as we head towards camp, and how might it continue to improve?
Yeah, well, I think that the offensive line, whenever he came in, and even a little bit last year, had a lot of holes in it that needed to be fixed. And so the Bengals only took one offensive lineman, one offensive pick in general in the draft this past year. But you look at free agency, and so they have a new center. They have Ted Karras, they have Lyle Collins, Alex Kappa. So those guys are really, they're not just additions, they're massive upgrades, and they should all pan out. And if they do so, then the Bengals have what could be actually one of the better offensive lines in the league. I know that PFF has them as a top 10, which Joe Burrow should certainly be hoping comes to fruition.
No doubt about it. And what about the rest of that offense? You talked about Jamar Chase, obviously another elite player, a young player in this league and on the AFC side, which is just stacked. But when you look at the team and you look at the offense, where is it headed in 2022? What do we see that's going to be the same? What do we see perhaps that might change?
Yeah, well, I think that it's all going to hinge on how well this offensive line performs. And so if they do have an intact offensive line, the way that some people believe that they will, the Bengals have everything on offense. I think that Joe Mixon's done a pretty solid job, and then the offensive line will help open up the run game. And he's done some good things out of the backfield as well. And then you have the wide receiving core, not only Jamar Chase, you have T. Higgins, Tyler Boyd. And so combined with everything else, that looks pretty good. And I know that it's easy to look at teams that we've done it before and things look great on paper and somehow fall apart. And really all it would take is honestly the offensive line not being this big improvement that we thought it would be. But I think that the Bengals have everything together on offense in the best way that they've had in several years.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting. And I think people in Cincinnati here are very excited about it, and I can see why. Switching sides of the ball now, Crissy, How did the Bengals draft go? What defensive outlook do they have for 2020? Are we going to see some improvement there? I know they lost some pieces. Talk about what they lost, what they gained, and where they might stand.
Yeah, well, there were some pieces lost, but I thought that the Bengals drafted well. I thought the Bengals already had a pretty decent defense last year and that they really played a big role into the Super Bowl run. But all picks but one were defensive picks in the draft, and it looked like they really wanted to hit the secondary hard. So there's a lot of selections to be excited about. One of those is Cam Taylor-Britt out of Nebraska, who they took in the second round, was kind of a dark horse guy who really emerged to be something big and really made his presence known in college. And so you have that. You have the Michigan safety Daxton Hill, Toledo safety Tyson Anderson kind of coming up later in the draft. But it's clear that they wanted to make some changes within this secondary and that that's a really big area of issue for them. And so they took some good guys, took some guys early. And so I think that if those guys end up being what they hope that they will be, this is a team that could be even better on defense, and we could see end up with a lot more takeaways.
No doubt about it. Before I let you go, Crissy, sports betting became legal in Ohio. They're working on the whole apparatus there. The Bengals have applied for a sports betting license. Is this something that you see happening around the NFL? Is going to happen more and more? Obviously, Las Vegas, it's been there. It's now everywhere. What do you think about that? And how are the Bengals going to be able to maybe turn this into additional revenue?
Yeah, well, sports betting is a quickly growing trend. It's not going away. And as a matter of fact, it seems to be just like doubling itself in size every single year. And so I know that it's the state of Ohio is legalizing sports betting in 2023. And according to that initial report from Dan Monk, it's 85 companies within the state will be able to apply for a license that will include betting kiosks, online betting, and then retail sports books. And so obviously, I mean, you don't have to explain this. This is something that comes down to money quite literally. I think it's good overall for the experience, for the team, for an organization. And I think that we're going to see this is just the tip of the iceberg as it gets legalized more and more teams taking advantage of this and doing the same thing that Cincinnati did.